Hi, I'm Anthony WagenerSmith, and I want to add my greetings to you at the South Pacific Division Symposium on Church Planting. It's been a blessing to me through the years to form meaningful relationships with several of you through training events in Australia, meetups in North America, teaching some of your ministers from across. Hi, I'm Anthony WagenerSmith, and I want to add my greetings to you at the South Pacific Division Symposium on Church Planting. It's been a blessing to me through the years to form meaningful relationships with
If we could take our seats. I don't actually expect this afternoon's program to go as long as it's said there, but we aim to finish by 4, but we'll probably be finishing a little bit before then. So we have 2 presentations this afternoon. The first one is, and it's the only one of this symposium. Some of you may remember a couple of years ago, all our symposium was via the screen. That was fun times, wasn't it, Erika? This one is done by Dr. Anthony WagenerSmith, who is currently in the Trans-European Division in charge of Adventist Mission Church Planting over there. He was before then in Andrews University at NADEI, and we are looking at, and Dr. Gilbert Kanji was here before. He's probably still eating, knowing Gilbert. I noticed, yeah, okay. And so we're looking at setting up a centre like NADEI here at Avondale University, and Dr. Gilbert Kanji is going to be heading that up. Dr. Anthony Wagener-Smith is also a church planter that has planted churches that planted churches. So he has gone across to Europe, and they've asked him to kind of set up a system of church planting that he, Jerson Santos from the General Conference and a few others have set up. And this method of planting churches is set up in such a way that it's sustainable, doesn't need the leader doing everything. It's actually something that can roll out across Australia and New Zealand. And so he is wanting to team with our division because he's saying the challenges facing Australia and New Zealand are the same as Europe are facing, and they're probably more advanced. You know the story of the canary in the mine, that when the gas arises, the canary is the one that detects it first. Well, in Europe, Christianity is, well, it's part of history. We'll go past the church. Yes, we used to be Christian. We used to do that, but it's like a museum. Museums are great to visit, but who'd want to live there? So the challenges they face and the challenges we face are very similar. So he would like some of us to go across to him and help him set up this system in Europe, and then he would come and help set up the system here in Australia. So he's going to talk a little bit about that process. Now, you know, Pastor Glenn and I are meeting on Tuesday because we actually have an Adventist Missions Committee, Division Adventist Missions Committee on Tuesday, where this idea will be talked about quite a bit. But we wanted to give you a heads up about what is being tried. Having said that, I want to say that yesterday we're talking about cross-cultural, the challenges with that. A friend of mine is leading church planting in Tokyo. And I want you to think about this as a cross-cultural challenge that they've just discovered. You can't vision cast with the Japanese. You can't call for commitment to a core team. They won't go for any of that. They won't commit to anything until they've actually experienced it. So if you want to plant churches and you cast a vision about what these churches are going to be, they'll go, yeah, okay, we'll join it when we see it. So they actually have to develop a church around with these people and have them experience community, and only then will they join. So when we talk about planting churches, we talk about cast the vision, build the core team, all that sort of stuff. You can't build a core team over there unless they're in it. And they're experiencing community. So that's been a big game changer for them. And I'm just showing that the issue of cross-cultural mission is challenging for us here in Australia, but think about it around the rest of the world. So we've been doing these symposiums. The last one was on disciple making. This one's on church planting. The next one, beginning next year, will be on mission of the city, and the one after that will be cross-cultural. We'll be looking at this more often. Okay, so Anthony Wagener-Smith is a personal friend of mine. I learned so much from him when we dialogue. We have taught together, and we have been friends together. He said he was a friend of mine and presented to me in front of a conference a Donald Trump mug. I think it was Make America Great kind of mug. And I said, yeah, and you're supposed to be my friend. And he just had that big smile on his face going. But that's another problem he has. So let me have prayer. We'll watch this. If you have any questions, we'll do that. Then we're going to have Camila Skaf. He's going to come and talk with us. Camila and her husband, Joseph, have one of the best centres of influence transitioned into a church plant that I know of in Australia. And it's here in Newcastle. So she's going to be talking about that. And then after that, we're going to have a panel discussion of the issues that we see raised through our whole weekend. And then we have a gift we want to give you all. We won't give it to you now because you'll be reading it while people are talking, and that would be so rude. So we'll give it to you at the end before you go home. So you have to stick around to get the gift. Can I just have prayer? And then we'll have Anthony on. Father in heaven, thank you that we can come together and we can talk about making disciples that plant churches. And as we hear from Anthony, may we learn from the challenges he's faced from going from America across to Europe and how that could impact us in church planting. In your name, amen. Thank you. Great.
Hi, I'm Anthony WagenerSmith, and I want to add my greetings to you at the South Pacific Division Symposium on Church Planting. It's been a blessing to me through the years to form meaningful relationships with several of you through training events in Australia, meetups in North America, teaching some of your ministers from across the division at Andrews University and the Theological Seminary. Your division is an inspiration. It is a movement. And my prayer is that conversations that come out of presentations like this can help stir on that discussion about continued growth and commitment to do whatever God is calling you to do. I want to focus specifically on developing multipliers through church planting residencies. But before that, a few comments on the challenge that we have here in Europe. And I mention the word we because in January of this year, my family moved from the States to the London area where the office is to work with the Trans-European Division in Mission. And you can see a picture there. My wife is from South Africa, our kids born in the States, and now this new season experience in the UK and across the 22 countries in Europe that compose the Trans-European Division. We come as listeners and learners, and some of the things I've learned is about the incredible history of mission going out of the Trans-European Division, around 1,000 missionaries from Britain and Scandinavia to Africa, the Middle East, and beyond from 1929 all the way up to the early 90s. And I want to say thank you to your division because there are many from Australia, New Zealand, and other places that have served with distinction at all levels of the church. As these mission fields grew, they became administratively separated and organized on their own. You see 1970, the Horn of Africa, 1980, West Africa, until you get to 2012 with the creation of MENA. And after 2012 and through today, the TED, for the first time in its history, has been an all-European division. Places that were formerly hotspots of the modern missionary movement and sending out, today are the Christianity is on the margins, the church is in the decline, and secularism is the most dominant and in many places fastest growing worldview that we have. And to situate this, here are the 4 divisions that are headquartered in post-Christian cultures to describe the numbers in terms of population ratio. The SPD, 610,000 members across 43 million people with a member-to-population ratio of 140 per 10,000, with a significant amount of your growth happening through the incredible evangelism and movement taking place in PNG and across the islands. The NADEI, although it has 1.2 million members across 371 million, it has a member-to-population ratio of 34 to 10,000. The EUD, our Inter-European Division, 5 people per every 10,000. And then you see the Trans-European Division, 88,000 members, half of which are in the British Isles, across 207 million people, and the ratio is only 4 out of every 10,000 people identify as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. The Australian writer Mark Sayers, in his book Disappearing Church, said something that really captured my imagination. He says, post-Christianity is not pre-Christianity. Rather, post-Christianity attempts to move beyond Christianity while simultaneously feasting upon its fruit and gutting it of the costs, commitments, and restraints that the gospel places upon the individual will. So we today see this idolization of individuality, the autonomous self, as the most important thing about many of these fields. And also at the same time, we see this high standard of living in many of these countries which has taken place because of Christian ideas. And so things like healthcare, the idea of inpatient healthcare is a distinctly Christian idea that started in Europe. The idea of education and making that publicly available as a service to others is a Christian idea. But these ideas became so successful, today they are nationalized. And to use Mark Sayer's phrase, the culture is feasting upon the fruits of Christian ideas while rejecting the roots. So pray for us, and we will pray for you. And so I want to talk with you about developing multipliers through through church planting residencies or cohorts. And I want to do this in the context of something I've been a part of for the last 12 years, that's ACTS Church Planting Support System. And ACTS is just an acronym for the 4 pillars of any group or movement that's rapidly planting and multiplying churches. I've had the opportunity to study several of them, and there's 4 common points. The first is assessment, having a plan for how you select the church planters and develop them. Coaching, which is helping them to understand what God's calling them to do, not just trying to copy someone else. Training, going through the key principles, stages, aspects of developing a new church that's not only mission-focused, but it's committed to the Seventh-day Adventist message and mission, and helping people to do that in a way where they discover what that looks like in their context. And then the S is for sending, which is how do we support and send out new planters, new teams? How do we leverage the resources that we have, the huge network of not just local congregational churches, but conferences, unions, division, networking between that to really send people out to see a movement. And I'm going to do this in the context of 5 key essentials to think about and to work through as you look at how these principles can be applied in your context. And so this really is the why, and it's also some of the how. And in each 5 area, I want to explain, illustrate, and then end with a discussion question that can be useful in thinking about how it applies to your own individual field. So the first essential in developing church planting residencies is the power of a catalyst group. Here's a picture of Robert Coleman, someone whose ideas have had a significant impact on my life and ministry. And I met him a few years back when I was younger and more spry. And one of his quotes, I think, really describes the power of a catalyst group. He says, "One cannot transform a world except as individuals in the world are transformed. And individuals cannot be changed except as they are molded in the hands of the master. The necessity is apparent not only to select a few helpers, but also to keep the group small enough to be able to work effectively with them. The more concentrated the size of group being taught, the greater the opportunity for effective instruction." And so the power of a catalyst group is not just because it's small. A small group is not necessarily a catalytic group. What makes it have potential is that those individuals are invested in with the expectation and commitment that they will go out and then invest in others. This is the difference between planting churches and having a movement. The power of a catalyst group. In 2010, I had just got started planting churches, my wife and I, our family, where we lived in the U.S. state of Florida. And while I was there, I started to dream and to think about the challenge of when I plant and I'm gone, who's going to continue? And also, how do other people get excited and committed to take risks and to step out in faith to also start new churches? Because in some parts of our world it's common, in others it's quite rare, particularly our Western context with our majority cultures. Here's a picture from 2010 while I was serving in Florida. I met a friend named Gerson Santos, and together we both started to pray and started to think and to dream, what might it look like to create a network that can truly grow and not just plant churches, but develop new leaders, those who are practically involved, to start a movement of churches that are committed to the Seventh-day Adventist movement and message. And so we made more mistakes than you have time or interest to hear. And still mistaking and learning as we go along, but you can see there the power of a catalyst group. In 2015, 5 years later, we started with 2 locations. In 2016, we grew to 1 location. That's called growth by attrition. 2017, 4 locations. 2018, 7 locations. 2019, 2020, until this last year, 2021, 23 different locations where we have church planting residencies, all going through a process, allowing flexibility, but going through a process of assessment, coaching, training, and sending to really see a movement committed to the Lord's work across many different cultures. In the 24 locations for church planting residencies around the world, you see a variety of cultures and a variety of locations. Discussion. If you are going to start a catalyst group with the potential for movement, how should you prioritize your energy and your resources? A second key to developing these residencies is not only the power of a catalyst group, but the importance of a clear selection and coaching process to make sure you get the right kind of people as a part of that group from the beginning. And the example of Jesus, of course, is countercultural to how we do things. Jesus spent all night in prayer, selected 12, and the world was changed. We spend a few minutes in prayer, invite anyone willing to show up, and nothing changes. So the power of a selection process, and you can see some of the areas we focus on there in the selection of the planter, the importance of a coaching system. If we had time, we could look at that more, training components, and also sending, how we support and send out through the Adventist structures. The layout of the residency is 4 modules, typically over the course of 12 to 14 months. And you can see with each module, the focus expands from the planter and a missional DNA to the core group, the community, the gathering on Sabbath, which comes at the end. And notice the last point is key in that box. It says planters become facilitators for the second generation. So the goal in getting the catalyst group is not just those you're going to go deep with, but those who are going to continue planting when you do the second generation, but now take on a coaching assignment, help as facilitators in some of the presentations and sharing their own experience. So discussion question number 2, what will your selection process be, and how will you relationally coach your planters to implement what they are learning in the modules? A third key to setting up these residencies is not only the power of a catalyst group and a clear selection and coaching process, but its influence. And this is something that is so powerful and important, because your influence as a leader comes through implementation, not certification. I'm going to repeat that. It's implementation, being a practitioner, not all the trainings and the certifications and the degrees that people are really looking for and respond to. As an example, here's a picture on the left. The gentleman on the left is named Steve Letty. Some of you are familiar with him. He started his corporate life working in Pizza Hut, and he was so effective at cleaning and making the pizzas and the cheese and the sauce that he got promoted to shift manager and then the manager of the whole store. And the company was amazed because there was such high quality. He was doing such a good job that they sent other people to come check out his Pizza Hut. So then he got promoted as a regional director, where he was training others that want to start a Pizza Hut. He was a Pizza Hut planter. But his influence did not come from his degrees. It came from being very good at what he does and willing to get his hands dirty and be a practitioner. And he's applied that to church planting. Him and his wife have planted 6 churches, and you can see a picture here of they're on the 3rd generation residency in the conference where he serves, Potomac Conference in the Washington, D.C. area. Another example, Ray Lord Reyes, a pastor in Manila, urban Manila. He's working, he's started planting a church, and then he became an associate ministerial director of his conference in his mid-20s. And instead of using that just to develop his own stuff and events and programs, he continued to expand and develop a catalyst group. You can see a picture here, and this is recent as of 2 weeks ago with this video. He's on the 3rd generation residency, and this residency is led by and attended by lay planters. And so it's just an incredible story of the power of a catalyst group and having a clear selection and coaching process. Alex Palmeira, a pastor in Brazil, he planted and then formed the first catalyst group there. It was a privilege for me to be a part of it. And you see in the pictures there, that group has grown and multiplied. Today they have 8 residencies across Brazil, and one of them is in the 4th generation. Now, Alex moved to North America, accepted a call to move, but those residencies did not fall flat because there are facilitators and leaders in place, and you can see a picture of one of them, Pastor Joao, who's there in the area helping to facilitate as a leader and a catalyst with those groups. Here's the leadership pipeline that we use, and again, I share this not to copy, but because whatever you do, you need to have a pipeline. So we've worked on this through the years with 4 ways to be involved. The first is a planter, those who are actively planting. The second is a facilitator, those who have planted, and then the 2nd generation, they coach or they give a presentation or they help to facilitate the residency. A 3rd way to be involved is as a leader, the one who actually leads and plans and executes on that cohort or residency. And the last is a catalyst. A catalyst is simply a leader who's made other leaders. So these are people who have not only run their own set of modules, but now helping someone else to develop and jumpstart a movement in a new location. And another example of this gentleman, Kevin, on the left, he planted a church in a dance studio, is connecting with his conference and, his community, and then through his conference is now working to facilitate, they're in the 2nd generation in California of planters there. And it's exciting to see some just from that group looking at that picture right now who are active facilitators in the next round that's taking place. So discussion question. How will you shift from training the trainers who train the trainers to training the practitioners who train the practitioners? To repeat that again, it's this mindset shift that your influence comes not because of your training and your certification, but because of your implementation. That's where the focus needs to be. And then the 4th key is to have consistency in experience, but also flexibility in application. So as it grows, and even in places where you work, you have many different cultures. How can you create a consistency of experience where each planter goes through same basic elements of planting a church, regardless of culture? You're tracking progress, you're helping to support, but also you allow for flexibility in application. So every plant needs a starter and a sustainer, and that could be a paid leader, a volunteer leader, whatever that looks like, to allow flexibility. Every planter needs a team. In some places, you can recruit a team where we have a saturation of Adventists. In others, you have to essentially evangelize your own team, like many places we have here in Europe. Gathering on Sabbath. Some gather in a church building. It could be a house. It could be a park, a rented storefront. Consistency and experience in the residency, but flexibility in application. Here's a group from Madrid, and the picture on the top right is of a planter who's planting an outdoor church to reach the outdoor community in Switzerland. Very different approach than perhaps other places. Another example of this is the individual with the circle around his head, second from left, Sergio Quevedo. He was the primary facilitator leader in the 1st generation going through, they're on the 3rd generation now, of residencies in southern New England. And it was great to be a part of that. Sergio did not know, but God was preparing him and his family for a move to Tokyo, Japan, where the General Conference has an emphasis called Mission Unusual Tokyo. And he's learning the language. He's part of a missionary team with other families. Church planting is a primary focus, and you can see the Acts group that they have there. Completely different context, completely different set of training and understanding, but consistency and experience. And the key is when transitions take place and you have a leader, things do not fall flat if others have been trained to continue that movement in what's taking place. So discussion question number 4. How will you avoid both extremes of copying the methods of others and also being so principle-driven that new planters have no examples or specifics? And then the 5th and final key is non-geographic movement within the Adventist structures. Now let me be clear on what I'm not saying. I'm not saying there's no place for structure, strategic planning, organization, and excellence. Of course there is, and our church is blessed with a great system. What I am saying is if you start a catalyst group, whether you're a pastor on a district level, a conference, union, or division leader, wherever you're serving, in 5 to 7 years, there's a good chance that one or none of those individuals will still be there. So the question is, how will you develop those leaders so when these transitions take place, the group continues moving forward? And a second reason why it's so important to have a non-geographic movement within Adventist structures is because positions are temporary, relationships are enduring. That's one of the things that I've learned is that your position is temporary, all of us, but the relationships that we form are enduring. So if you have this network, you may only have a few church planting projects in your area, but you can leverage the network through a hybrid way to coach, to support, to train, so that the movement continues. And I think of this as the difference between terminal thinking, which is a sickness that ends in death, and movement thinking. Terminal thinking and promotion says invest in advertising. Movement thinking, invest in a few who invest in many. Recruitment, terminal thinking says invite anyone. Movement thinking, invite those who you are discipling. That's the key question if someone wants to plant a church. Not who are you going to recruit, but who are you discipling? And you can see some of the different areas there in this shift between terminal thinking and movement thinking until you get to the last one. We want to shift from planning the next event to developing the next multiplier. And what a game changer that would be just in our communication as a church. Whenever we have a news article, we not only say what happened, how many people got baptized and the details, but also how many people are being trained to continue that movement, to continue that ministry now that it's over. The potential for exponential growth is huge. And with the Acts movement, we've made our share of mistakes, continuing to learn and grow. But in 7 years, we've reached 23 residencies. You can see there an ideal picture just to illustrate the math. Nothing's ideal. Life is not ideal, and this is not selling a program. This is an invitation to suffer and do something significant that's going to take some of your best energy. But the power of a catalyst group can create exponential growth, not simply incremental. I want to end with this scripture, 2 Timothy 2:2. It's familiar to many of you. The things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, Paul says, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. Notice what I highlighted in blue. The idea is that from the Bible is that what makes a leader reliable and qualified is your ability to equip the next generation, not simply perform ministry. What a culture change, systemic change that would be if we get to the place where young ministers and our lay people and others, their greatest dream of success is not what happens when they're in their role, it's what happens when they leave their role. And in order for that to take place, how we develop others, how we help people experience transformation. Because a new pastor can come in and change your programs, change your sermons, change all the details. But if you've helped people experience transformation, that's something they can never take away, that can never be changed and is enduring. And so I pray that as you continue focusing on this powerful emphasis on church planting in whatever way it looks like, that it would not just be a program, it's not a department, but it would truly be a way of life and a system change in thinking to develop things that can really impact the future of the Lord's work across the South Pacific Division. God bless you. Change in thinking to develop things that can really impact the future of the Lord's work across the South Pacific Division. God bless you.
He won't say it, but it took him hours to do that. Their division doesn't actually have a media centre, And so videoing and editing, he was trying all different things, and even as late as Monday he was going, when do I have to hand this in? He'd spent 2 days on it up till then. He's very committed to our division. So I actually, any comments, what do you think of his kind of thinking? I asked you that first. What do you think of his thinking? Do you agree with him? Well, if you say no, you don't, then there's a problem, I suppose. But what is it about his thinking resonated with you the most?
Got some question coming through.
There's one from there, then we'll have the new director of the Discipleship, Evangelism, Church Planting at Avondale University has a question.
In the shop. Okay, this is from Jessica. How do we meet the requirements, KPIs of a conference when doing a church plant? Will conferences shift their expectations? Further to that, she's added, as in conferences want to know how many baptisms, attendees, etc. But if you're doing a church plant, it may be years until a community member comes to baptism. Do you remember the original question?
Not really. It wasn't my Jessica, was it?
No.
Good.
It was, how do we meet the requirements of a conference, like expected KPIs as in baptism? Will conferences shift their expectations?
I think we're always going to be interested in baptisms. It's one of the reasons there's a book called Numbers in the Bible. But I think there is a transition in the thinking of our leadership, and it's evidence when you get them together and they're discussing the future strategies of the church, and Glenn can speak to this. They're getting more and more interested in the sending measurements as opposed to just the baptism thing. So they are becoming more and more interested in that. So yes, the conference's whole focuses now are much more in line with disciple making and discipleship, and that is resonating right through our conferences and the issue of church planting. So yes, that focus is changing. But here's the challenge. They're now going to be asking questions about how many people you sending from your church. And for some pastors, that's going to be hard because they actually haven't been training their people to actually go out. So it's not just going to be an easy thing. Yeah. Dr. Gilbey, the Kanji director.
He did need that introduction, seriously. No, I just wanted to make a reflection here. And someone in his presentation this morning made reference to the notion of mentality, that it takes a long time to establish a mentality, and it's going to take an equal amount of time to do this revision of mentality. So my reflection on the presentation is nothing short of a cultural shift is going to turn the ship around. So in the area of church planting, in what he's talking about, but also in terms of the wider culture of the church, but one must be aware of it and one must be intentional about it.
And there's no reason why that can't start with you guys. Okay? I like one of the things I like about his presentation and the ACTS process is it starts small and it's sustainable, and it doesn't rely on a charismatic leader to do it. It's a ground roots. That's it, grassroots. Thank you, Nick. So, yeah, it's a grassroots thing. Any other comments about this?
Yeah, I like the way that he dispelled a few of the myths around church planting. That, as you mentioned, you need a charismatic leader, or you need all your ducks in a row. You need all these funds, or you need certain things to be able to church plant, and that's just not the case. Having that core group, that catalyst group there is the most important element, and I like the way that he brought the brought to the table that the most important part of forming that catalyst group is prayer. That it's not by your selection, it's God will bring those people into your sphere that you're discipling, and that will form your catalyst group. And, you know, for you to be able to walk away from a church plant and for it to still thrive is evidence of that process. Yeah.
Yep, very much so. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, we have other refreshments here arrived. There is a question. And then we have a short break. And then then it's Camila and this panel, and then we'll be ending up. So, yes, what's the question, Craig?
Is there an ideal number of people that should be in a catalyst group?
No, there's not. Remember, he was talking about in that first catalyst group, it's actually a small group. And over time, that catalyst group will grow to a larger core group, okay, and then the plant will go off that. But the initial catalyst, and as he pointed out, is quite often quite small. For me, when one of the first churches I planted, the core group grew to about 30, okay, but that was at the core group stage, but the first stage was about 10. Glenn, sorry, where's the mic?
Yeah, I think one of the things I liked about his presentation that he's thinking next generation and multiplication. And that can happen by influence. We all have influence, and if we've got that mindset and we start ministry with that mindset, it makes a huge difference.
Yep.
So 2 Timothy 2:2 is always thinking not about just the success of this church plant, but who are you discipling, and in the disciple-making process, wherever they go, wherever they are, will they continue to be a disciple-making disciple?
Yeah.
That's the big KPI if you want it, and that's that thinking of influence and multiplication. And it's a mindset that you can start your ministry with. And I would encourage that.
I really did like his emphasis. This is a second generation, this is a third generation, this is a fourth generation catalyst, which is good. So thank you, everyone. We're going to have a break for a short break. Did you say, Shay?
10.
10 minutes. Then we'll come back and Camila Skaf is going to be introduced. But could I ask for Maddie, Shay, Jessica, Glenn, and Camila just to come down here for a few minutes, please.
We have cold drinks at the back.
She's doing the presentation first, afterwards. But after her, move it aside and put 5 chairs up here, if that's right. She has a story to tell that's been led by you. So keep her mind calm, focused, and we pray that what she says will be what you want us to hear in your name. Okay, I will introduce you.
Should I wait there?
They're not all back yet. And after I introduce you, I'll look straight out back because I now need to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
But I'll be back. I reckon I saw someone like him a little bit bigger in the NRL final. One of Penrith's stars. Watch them run it in England, then we'll hop in the plane, go to Scandinavia, do the same thing in about a week, and then he'd come out and do the same thing with us, and probably have Sergio from Tokyo come with us, because the team is Sergio, Anthony, Gerson Santos, the guy from Philippines, Brazil, and they've asked me to join in. That's kind of the group that's kind of running. Oh, so Steve Letty's now part of it too. Okay, can I invite everybody to take a seat? Well, don't take it anywhere. Just you place yourself on the seat and we'll get ready to start. Okay. It's been my privilege to get to know Camila and Joseph over the last number of years, and when they came up with their concept for food pharmacy, which you'll hear about, it's one of the times when the church structure can actually work at its best, because she's part of a conference that has supported her in this seeming to many people crazy idea that her husband and her came up with, and the conference supported her, the union then supported her, and then those of us at the division also went, and then it went to the general conference, and they went, wow, this is something we're interested in. So she and Joseph have had support, but she may talk about it, the hard work, the stress, and basically, even at lunchtime, you were saying, when you're doing stuff like this, the devil's going to try and stop you every step of the way. You just have to know that's going to happen. And your prayer life, your spirituality is key to this. So Joseph can't be here today because the pastors of North New South Wales, under Aaron's dad, have commanded them all to go up to Yarrahapney for a weekend retreat for the pastors. And Camila, as one of the pastors in North New South Wales, was given special dispensation to be able to be here with us today. So we're very grateful for that. Camila, come up here, let me pray for you. We really look forward to your presentation. Father in heaven, thank you so much for Camila and Joseph, their kids, their commitment to you, way you're leading them in their lives. And as we hear this story, may it also resonate with us and give us courage and ideas of what we could do in your vineyard, I pray in your name. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I see a lot of friendly faces, and I said hi. So for those of you that haven't had a chance to talk yet, Hello, Shabbat Shalom. It's really great to be here. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the food pharmacy, which has become our center of influence, about 40 minutes drive from here in Cardiff. I actually just looked at the map the other day. They're changing Cardiff from to Macquarie Hills. So if you ever hear the Macquarie Hills, that's sort of the new name that they're giving to that neighborhood. It's Cardiff South, really, right next to that roundabout in Warners Bay. So I want to start with just sharing what inspired us. So I'm going to be sharing the steps into what we became today, so that way you may be able to relate to yourself, maybe a journey that you're going or something that you've been dreaming about or thinking about. So what inspired Joseph and I to start this center of influence and to invite others to join us, because you will see later on in this presentation that is about a teamwork. It's not just us. But yes, you need the catalysts, you need the leaders. Those are very important. So this center of influence has been, first of all, inspired by the Lord Jesus Christ. And in the book Ministry of Healing, it reads, "Our Lord Jesus Christ came to this world as the unwearied servant of man's necessity. He took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses, that he might minister to every need of humanity. The burden of disease and wretchedness and sin he came to remove. It was his mission to bring man complete restoration. And he came to give them health and peace and perfection of character." So this really was inspired us because we wanted to be able to, first of all, get to know the community and understand the community's needs. How can we minister to the community's needs? And one of the first things that we were assigned to do when we came, President at the time, his name just gone out of my head. What was my president at the time? Justin Lohman. Justin Lohman I remember he saying to us, "You're not going to go to any church. You're just going to mingle with the community, and you're going to understand the community, befriend the community, understand their needs." So that was an important thing for us. So by the time we started thinking of this inspiration of how Jesus did his ministry, it was really important to us that we would be going, understanding the needs of the community. Also, the direction. Where did we get the direction? Again, from what God has given us as blueprints for centers of influence. I'm not going to have to read everything here, but, Ellen White writes about the testimonies to the church that we are not to erect large buildings in the cities, so we must do more than what we have done to reach the people in our cities. So to us, it was really important to do something that was relevant to our cities. So she was saying, it doesn't have to be large buildings, but over and over again, the light has been given to me that we should establish in our cities small plants which shall be centers of influence. So that was very important to us. The Lord has a message for all of our cities, and this message we are to proclaim in our camp meetings and by other public efforts and also throughout publications. She also says hygienic restaurants are to be established in the cities. So that was like a bling, bling, bling moment to us, right? And by them, the message of temperance is to be proclaimed. Another key word here, temperance. What does that mean? What is that proclamation of temperance? Arrangements should be made to hold meetings in connection with our restaurants. Whenever possible, let a room be provided where the patrons can be invited to lecture on the science of health and Christian temperance. Again, the word temperance is coming here alongside with science. So it's very important to be something that is evidence-based as well as working accordance to what the Christian temperance is all about, where they can receive instruction on preparation of wholesome food and on other important subjects. So this was the framework for our start of the Center of Influence. We believe that these were criteria that we used to be able to select the projects, to invite the team, and to be able to really put a plan to move forward. Now, the other thing is that in our case, we chose something to do. I mean, you could be doing anything, but a restaurant was something that was our passion. And the reason why it's a passion, because we love food. We're foodies, and we also, in the beginning of our ministry, I decided to do a whole food plant-based chef course because I wanted to do cooking classes and a little bit more, I would say, credibility. However, what we found in this walk is that this message here that you can read on Testimony to the Church, it's not for the professionals, it's not for the professional chef, it's for everyone. So what we found in our walk is that we really didn't need any of the super skills that we have had it before, that we're learning this walk every day with Jesus. So she talks about not only the health and temperance topics, but also other appropriate Bible subjects. Again, appropriate. So you've got to know what is appropriate, what is relevant in the context that you're acting. As a people are taught how to preserve physical health, many opportunities to be found to sow the seeds of the gospel of the kingdom. So we started based on this direction, and we chose the location, which is where we are today, at the Attune Health Center. So that's what it looks like. It's on the top of a hill. And the owner of this location, his name is Simon Ashley. He's a Christian man, not an Adventist, a Christian man. And when I met with him, at the time, we were interacting with the community, as I spoke to you before, and we had a kind of a form of an informal center of influence, and we were starting with a house church planting. So it was all like, we didn't have a lot of time for planning. It was kind of like learn as you go. And we decided that we want to start a ministry that would be responding to the needs of the community. So again, while we were talking to this man, this location came. It was actually, the building was not even there. So when I met him for the first time, we met him, the building was not there. So the building's there today. It's almost 2 years old, and we are 1 year old. So we came in like about a year after they launched the building, and when I talked to him, it was a squash court, an old building that he bought in faith. He didn't have the money. He gave him a vision to buy that, to become a center of influence for God, and to partner with the Adventists, because he himself had read some of the Ellen White health books, Ministry of Healing especially. So when I met with this guy, it was like, yeah, we're on the same mission. Let's see what that looks like. What can we do? So as I said to you, and again, why? Why would we did face some questions. Why are you going to rent it? Why can't we just build a building, then you have more control of what you're doing? Well, this man, he had already 2 clinics in the region, and his business was growing. And he already had about 24,000 clients. And he wanted to move into this big building. And again, for us, we came across this as we were praying. Again, God will give you the answers. As we were praying, this is what we came into. I have been giving light that in many cities, it is advisable for a resident to be connected with treatment rooms. The two can cooperate and uphold right principles. The establishments will serve as feeders to the sanitariums. It's talking about the health retreats, as we were talking a little bit about during lunch. It's a connection. You can send them, they can send you. It's like a network or an ecosystem. And it's to be located in the country. And would be better be conducted in a rented building. So for us, this was key that not only the health retreats that we were running at the time were as a pop-up in rented buildings, but the restaurant, we received almost like I felt like God was saying, yeah, you can go for that. And the fact that Simon had agreed that we would uphold, so we would have complete control of the values and the principles of how our center of influence would operate. I'll give you an example here. Maybe later on will come up. But one of the values that I'm talking about is that we wanted to follow the Adventist health message as per Ellen White's blueprint. And as you can imagine, being a health center, there were things that they wanted to offer that we didn't want to offer as part of the cafe. First of all, have you ever heard in Australia of a cafe that doesn't have caffeinated coffee? In a doctor center. Well, we started talking to the professionals there about 4 years before we did that, implemented, just about brainstorming and why. And then we came to identify the needs of that community. which is the needs of our community. Those are needs in Australia. Did you know that 1 in every 2 Australians, 47% of Australia, had 1 or more 10 selected chronic diseases? And this was in 2017, 2018. It's actually grown now. Also, nearly 9 in 10, which is 89% of deaths in Australia back in 2018, was coming from those 10 chronic diseases. This is a huge loss if you're thinking about souls. You know, winning souls, well, you're losing souls for this. This is your biggest enemy right now. And in 2017 and 18, because Australia did this big census, right? They also found out that 67% of Australian adults were overweight or obese, which was a 50% up from the last census that they had, which was 1995. So this is extremely warning and concerning when it comes to government, when it comes to people that care about people, right? This is the biggest enemy and the biggest threat for when you think about people and lives. Also, 20 to 40% of the population in the area around food pharmacy identify themselves as secular, according to the census in 2016. So when we were looking and so, okay, let's look at the demographics and what are the needs. That's some of the information we found. There's a lot more to it. For example, suicide rates. So all of the early deaths, suicide rates were huge in this area, especially for people between 15 and 44 years old, which is really that sort of age of the action that really matters. So suicide was huge. So when we identify these needs here with the health professionals, including them, including the community, we found that, guess what? What God has given to us as a message of health and discipleship really is the solution for all of these issues. And as we presented this to the health professionals, and Simon was very open for us to invite our Adventist health professionals to join the team and work in the center to help to influence and educate them. I'm very pleased to say that we found that the solutions were very much aligned with what the over 1 million of studies that has been showing that is connected to food, to health. And more recently, many studies published by well-recognized universities show the benefits of whole food, plant-based diet to prevent and arrest chronic diseases and promote mental health. So with that type of solution, one of the solutions, we thought we're going to tackle on that and we're going to leverage. So one of the things that I did is I didn't bash on the coffee to say we don't drink coffee, or at least Ellen White says to abstain from caffeine. Why? So I didn't go into that talk because people could say, well, this is not an Adventist center. Why are you making us do that? And I never made it about controlling their actions because we can't control people's choices. But it was about what we were upholding as a value. And they embraced this value. So, for example, our cafe is 100% whole food plant-based, as well as 100% decaffeinated, as well as doesn't offer alcohol and tobacco, because it is a healing center. It is an anti-inflammatory center. So when people ask what we don't have, that's not the question that people ask usually. They come and say, what do you have? And I am pleased to say that, so this is one of the flyers that we're giving to the community around us. This is not the final version, so there's still a little bit, don't mind the words there, all of them. So, but it's a whole food, it's plant-based, it's sustainable. Our community, we actually changed that, I think, to eco-friendly on the final one. But our community, I was just at a green health forum last week with the Hunter Healthcare of the whole region. Everyone is talking about sustainability. How can you bring sustainability to healthcare? And how can you bring the low carbon emissions, strategies that you can support that cause? And although we know this is not our main cause, guess what? You will find that there are trends that are very strong, that if you identify them, it will help you to be sustainable as a relevant in your community. If you bring a message that nobody cares about, then nobody's going to hear you. But if you bring a message, and within your message is A lot of people are talking about eating whole foods because of the fibers that will help, especially with diabetes, another huge issue in Australia. People are talking about plant-based because it's good for you and it's good for the planet. And people are talking about sustainability, about lower carbon emissions. And so if your message has got a lot of those points, you'll be able to attract, especially the young people. We've been able to attract some of the young people that were actually on the way out of our church, and they're now immersed into our group. We also studied the viability. So we did a viability study with the market analysis. And like I said, I won't read everything, but like a full 70% of the world population reportedly is either reducing meat consumption or leaving meat off the table altogether. 70%. That's a huge number. That was presented by Forbes. We also found that Australia was the third fastest growing vegan market in the world after United Arab Emirates and China. And remember that word, the Emirates, the Arab Emirates, because we have a very cool story attached to our church plant from that. So these informations were all about 4 years ago that we compiled that to start, okay? This has actually grown. Like before they're talking about 215 million. Now they're talking about north of $250 million market. Only in Australia. That's Australia's market. So what we can see is that people, and especially young people, they are really caring for these causes. And also another research is that some will go for the planet, but most of people are coming to wanting to change their lifestyle and experiment a lower meat consumption or even a vegan diet because of health reasons. We also wanted the Center of Influence to be integrated, an integrated ministry model. So in this case, we had been working together with the conference. So the conference has been very supportive of what we had been doing. And when I joined the conference as a health director, it was because the conference really liked that model that we were learning as we go, because we're still learning, but, you know, we were in that journey. And they invited me to be part-time health ministry leader to see if we could encourage other people to join along and do similar things. And I'm actually quite pleased to know that we've got now a handful of churches that are either in the beginning stages or at more developed stages of having their own centers of influence. And even some of them that we've been learning along the journey and exchanging experience, like, for example, Mana Haven in Byron Bay. They revitalized a lot of what they're doing as well, and we're learning along as a team. So this model, that is a model based on the SOZO, or complete healing word, it involved health retreats, which our conference started offering. It was pop-up model, like I said, we were renting places and inviting the professionals to take time off their jobs to come in once or twice a year to run a health retreat with us. So we were having 10 to 14 health professionals, and people could buy their week, it's a package, and then come. Then we also had the Sozo eateries. Again, food pharmacy falls under that, but it's really all of the food businesses around our conference that we were trying to integrate and leverage from one another, like what you're doing here, getting together with one cause and learning. Then the Sozo education, again, leveraging from the resources that we have from the South Pacific Division, Elia Wellness, and all of the brilliant tools that they have built, but also leveraging from Dr. Neil Nelly in the US, and the Blue Zones, and things that our church people care about. The General Conference has amazing materials also, how to stop smoking and all of that. So leveraging from all that is out there and integrating into the education portion and promoting trainings, workshops. And lastly, which is one of our newest ones, is the Sozo Farm, integrating the outdoor classrooms. So we're actually at Stewart's Point now. If you go visit, ask them to see the farm. We're starting a sustainable syntropic ecological farm. It's fully organic, and it has attracted many people. We just, on B Camp, we say, oh, let's just do a little workshop. We didn't even advertise, and we had every day 20 to 30 people, from children to adults. Everyone is interested in food security. And so this is a very relevant ministry at the moment that we're investing on. We have at Food Farmacy a garden, the food garden, and we already started to get volunteers to come on a weekly basis to help us to produce, and we're hoping to be able to produce 80% of what we consume, and we already get all of the scraps, and we build our own compost, and so we use that. We have applied for the council to be able to use a little park on the side, so we can use an educative park for the residents to be able to learn how the food grows, how the food is getting eaten, and then go back to the soil. So the first Australian Healing Cafe was opened. Like I said, it was 100% good for humans. So our idea is that anyone that comes to our cafe is able to eat or drink something. So gluten-free, yes, you're going to be able to have it. You're going to have lots of options. If the person is vegan, vegetarian, they eat anything, they will be able to have that. Why? Because our foods are 100% healing. They're anti-inflammatory, and they taste amazing. If you've never gone there, I actually brought some vouchers. I hope I have one at least for each one of you, at least for the local ones. But I brought some vouchers. Okay, Wayne, remind me. For the good students, right? And I should give you questions. Make sure you're not sleeping after lunch. All right. So this first, so that's what Food Farmacy looks like. We want to follow again the blueprint. We wanted to have light colors to be an inspiring environment, a lot of sunlight coming in, soothing colors, and just an environment for people to feel that they're loved. And we actually have a lot of people walking in and saying things such as, oh, I just feel like there's a presence of God here. And these are people that are non-religious. Like, they will say things, some of them will say weird things like, oh, there's a vibe here that is really different. And, the other lady says, she took one of my teammates' hands, Diana, she's right there, and she says, you've got a really kindred spirit. And she's like, oh, thank you. It's like, no. You don't understand. It's a different kind of spirit. And then she's like, oh, thank you. And she's actually been there many times, and she's talking to all of us, and I can tell and that she's trying to figure it out. What is this kind of spirit? And we've been talking to her, and so it's just been an amazing. So again, the focus is to be your healing kitchen. Another aspect of our center of influence is to be individualization, personalized. We know everyone that walks in there. Especially, if it's the first time, we know that it's the first time. But we know the people that are going there. Most people that go there, they go at least once a week. And, of course, we have some people that go, but we know the people. We have a relationship with them. And, again, using those words, whole foods, plant-based, high nutrition density, anti-inflammatory, low carbon footprint, those are sort of part of our identity. And the people in the center, the health professionals, they've embraced that so much that I've had the other day an employee of the South Pacific Division coming to the osteopath appointment. And the osteopath, which is not an Adventist, not religious, say, have you been in our cafe here? We've got the best cafe in the region. Everything is healing. It's going to be great for you. You have to go. So this lady is having her appointment. She's like, yeah, of course, I'm going to try. This lady is so... And then she came in there, and she found out it was us, and she knows me. She's like, it's you. So this is the food farm. And she was very surprised, and pleasantly surprised, and very proud, because she was saying the way that this professional talked about it, it was that she was so proud to have that cafe there. And we can see that happening with all the 120 workers in that center. So we offer dine-in, we offer takeaway. So this is an example of takeaway. We wanted to offer food that is tasty and that is presented well, so that people won't feel like, that's vegan. Most people that go there, they don't know it's 100% food plant-based. Actually, they probably wouldn't walk in there. So we don't use big words like that. We never use the word vegan, or we say plant-based, but people don't really know what that is. So they just go curious. And and the other curious thing, too, is the coffee. People don't know that it's 100% decaffeinated. But we made a big investment. We bought the brand new, less model, the coffee machines that really make those beautiful coffees. We got that. And at the time, there was no more budget. And we, and then Julian, my friend, he keeps me, grounded, because I can be like, oh, let's just get that $20,000 machine. And Julian is like, you can have the $1,000 machine that Mana Haven doesn't use, 20 years old. And they said, okay, no, thanks, Julian, that, appreciate that. And guess what? Simon, the owner of the center, I said, Simon, do you think coffee is important for your center? He's like, yes. I said, would you lend me $20,000 to buy a whole set? And he says, yes, I would. I said, okay. So I actually bought that, and coffee is number one sellers. And guess how many people ever complain about being decaffeinated? None. We've never had anyone complain. If anything, we've got people a bit like, oh, there's no milk. And we said, oh, have you tried with the oat? No. All right, try. And then usually try and say, oh, that's amazing. We've had a few just say, no, thanks, and walk away. But with the coffee, we have actually had people saying, this coffee is amazing. I just feel so good when I drink it. I don't get the palpitations. I just feel like this relaxed. And then some people, young people, they go for trainings there. They come in the morning and says, I don't know what's wrong. Like, this coffee just makes me so concentrated. I just feel much better with it. So just an interesting thing. And I know coffee can be a big issue in everywhere you go. But we were bold. And guess what? God is being blessing. It is our first item. It is what differentiates us. And I don't regret one bit. We're actually becoming the well-known for having the best Skaf in the area. Like I said, we don't do anything without a team. So this is the core team that started. So Diana today, she's a Bible worker actually for our church plant. And she takes care mostly of the programs that we run in the evenings. Janelle and Mel, they are one of the first employees there. We have 3 people mainly, and I was at the time working as a chef, but because our chef bailed on the last minute, so I was there as part of the team. But I pretty much developed the menu with the help of input of trusted people that I know. And then Emily, this lady here, she came to one of our health retreats, and she had a catering business that she sold. And she says, Camila, I just want to be part of your community. Whatever you have for me, can you do it? And an interesting thing, she actually said to me, she wanted to be part of her health retreat as a volunteer because it did so much to her life. And anyway, I can tell many stories, but now, so Emily, this lady here, she said to me one day, I didn't feel comfortable with this vaccination. That was like right around the COVID time. And she says, but I went and I took it because I know you're probably going to need it for the health retreat, right? And I just want to be ready for it. This is like the passion for her to serve. And then she's been helping us with the health retreats, but because we didn't run a lot because of the COVID, an opportunity came for us to start transforming the canteen from Macquarie College into a similar model to this. And I asked her, would you like to be the manager for us there? And she took the job, and she's been doing a phenomenal job with Macquarie College. And our goal is to replicate this model of a center of influence at the Macquarie College and work closely with the families there. Okay, so we use things like October Mental Health Awareness. So we're always looking to be relevant to the community and to use themes that everyone else is talking about. So this is a national day, national month, actually, for Australia. And so we have things like bring a friend and get a free latte. And so we try to encourage, especially the Bible workers, the young people in the area, to come in and try our things. Because when they try, then a lot of the prejudice goes away. And also to stimulate friendships and community. We're also very moved when we see things like that. This is 2 of the GPs of the center praying for the patients, praying for the people that will come in. And one of them, Dr. Emma Camp, is an Adventist doctor. The other one is not an Adventist doctor. She's a Christian lady. Both of them are facilitating programs with us. So we run programs 3 nights a evening. So remember how I mentioned to you that back when Joseph started with me, we started Seeds, which was like a charity just to run the programs. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we didn't have a formal center of influence, but we're mingling with the communities and running programs. Eventually, that became a charity, a formal registered charity, and now that is the charity arm of Attune. So what we do is we run these programs in partnership, Food Farmacy as a location, and then, providing all the structure. Seeds and the volunteers will run the programs. And we have Attune Health Professionals also partnering with us. So we have programs like the LIFT project by Darren Morton. We have the CHIP program. All of these programs have presence of health professionals, and they run between 6, 7 to 10 weeks in the school term. And we're launching also an enhanced your gut health. That's an ELIA program. So again, we leverage from all of the tools that we have in our church to be able to facilitate. We wouldn't be able to do that all ourselves. So we get the best quality and we leverage that. So we also run workshops that are like a day thing. So once a month we have a workshop. This is a sourdough bread workshop. And our sourdough bread workshops are so popular. And this is the thing I want to point it out. When you're ministering to the community and their needs, be bold, because, for example, our bread workshops, we sold last ones for $120 for a 4-hour workshop. Guess what? The two of them were sold out. We had a waiting list. Why? Because this is relevant. People will prioritize when it's something that they care about. And I'm not saying that you have to charge for everything that you do, but you have to be careful, because when you undervalue your things, then people will also put a low value to it. And we also have the health clubs that are running weekly. So we have cooking clubs, which is every week at the food pharmacy. The gardening clubs that is starting now. We have the walking clubs and running clubs. And I would love to have a cycling club. Right, Glenn? I've actually, getting back to my bike, so I was thinking the other day, I need to find who am I going to get to run a cycling club, because I live very close to the Esplanade now, And that's another thing. While all of this happening, we had to move. Our landlord said, we're selling the house, you guys have to get out. And with 2 little kids, a center of influence, just, starting, God found a house in the housing market that nobody could find anywhere to rent at an affordable price. We live 2 minutes away from the food pharmacy at a brand new house. When we moved from Brazil, we just newly married. And I had just bought an apartment. It was beautiful. And it had all the nice decorations. And I remember loving my kitchen. When I walked into this house that God sent us near food pharmacy, it was within our budget. And the kitchen counter had the same kind of stone that I have in my other apartment. And I just say, these are little pearls that, Jesus sends on our way to say, I care for you and for the details. And all of that, so why did I want to mention all of this story? Because the church plant didn't start by just kind of, okay, let's open a building and get people in. So I wanted to show this photo. I actually, I was doing this presentation at 1 a.m. last night. It's not very healthy, but that was the time that I found to do it. And this lady on the middle there, Erica, her and her husband right on the back there, he's not Adventist. She was baptized into our house church when we were doing house church right in the beginning. And she's now, and her husband, they got 2 little girls, and they are now part of our core team, and we are discipling them. And they're helping us with the church plant. And when we asked them, would you like to be part of our church plant? Yes, we're very excited. Dr. Russell Ling, he's a GP at the center. He's also part of our church plant. And I wanted to show this because, she came to one of our very first cooking classes in town when she was working here during the week, living in Sydney on the weekend. And she came to a cooking class and started this journey with us. So she's been on a journey with us for 5 years. And just now, she's sort of part of that church planting team and starting a church plant. So sometimes the results will take some time. One of the things that I wanted to finish with, there's a couple of the other slides that I want to show you. So this is our church plant today. I didn't have a photo. I know we took it, but I couldn't find a photo with everyone together. So this lady, the blonde, she was at Warner's Bay Church before, and she came with, and then she's brought a couple of visitors, and this lady there, little kids, and this couple here, these guys from Saudi Arabia. Remember I told you to remember the Emirates, so he was studying at Newcastle University at the time. He just a couple of weeks ago moved. His wife there, she was my babysitter. I couldn't do it without her in this first year of food pharmacy. She was in my house almost every day. And she actually started doing Bible studies. And she said that what she experienced with my kids, it was just completely different than what she experienced with other kids and other families, that she needed to know what was there. And we started studying the Bible with her. And this guy here, her husband, he's Muslim, very faithful. And one day he calls Joseph. I get a bit emotional. He calls Joseph and he said, tell me if I want to know if Jesus is God, because if he's God, then I need to know. And Joseph said, well, because, they developed a friendship. And he said, look, he says, Abdullah, if you tell me that, if you convince me that your Quran, your religion is the right one, and I move to your religion, nothing happens to me. But if I convince you, if I can show you that Jesus is God, what are you going to do? Because, you can. He says, I'm not afraid. He says, what I've seen, he says, I want you guys to come to Saudi Arabia. He says, my dad can get you a visa in 2 weeks, and you can be residents there. And he says, let's open a food pharmacy there. That's why I get emotional, because I know that our world church doesn't have a presence there. They have some presence, but it's sort of, probably like like house churches. And they just moved last week there, back. And we know that they've planted a seed, and he's been telling me about this city that they're building there that is all sustainable, low carbon. And he says, this is for food pharmacy, and he's asking us to do something there. Sorry, I just got emotional for a moment because they're really dear to us. They were part of that journey. So that's our church plant. It's small. We're just meeting now every other week. We still feel like we need at least 3 more families to have a really good core team. It's really hard to start with a small team, but I really like the model that was talked before here, the catalyst, finding people that it's really important and to empower people. We have some young people working with us, like 19 years old, and they're doing amazingly well. We've had their parents behind their back sort of coming to us and says, their transformation that has happened to them after they started working at food pharmacy is phenomenal. So I can see that the food pharmacy is not only to minister the outside, but it's a discipleship school that people can learn and practice what ministry and what hard work is all about. So, thank you for listening, and I hope that was helpful.
Oh, yeah. How many of you all of a sudden found sawdust in this place? I did, and I watched Glenn over there as well. Thank you so much, Camila. Great to hear that practical, what you guys are doing there. Any questions for Camila? Yeah, move to the side. We need the microphone. Mark, can you do that? Is there a question on the... Sorry? How many paid staff?
So all of our staff are paid staff on the food pharmacy. Besides me, because I work for the conference part-time, and then the other part-time is sort of work there, but it's like just I do it as a lay person. And we have, right now, we probably have around 10 people, but they take shifts. So we always have 3 full-timers, so 3 shifts, people in the morning and afternoon. So, but that could be different. Like the person that is in the morning might not be the person in the afternoon. So most of them are casual workers. We only have 1 full-timer at the moment.
I've got a question that I want to ask you, Camila. You've painted a really good story, and really praise God for what you guys are doing. Somewhere in there, given we believe in the great controversy, the devil must have been trying to mess things up. Could you elaborate?
All the time.
Can you elaborate a little on that? Because
Yeah.
otherwise it sounds a little too good to be true, if you understand what I'm saying.
No, yeah, look, I was sharing with my friends back there today in lunch that we have those battles every single day. I can give you some, like, for example, we were meant to open, we had budget for, when we first did the budget, we had, okay, this is how much we need. When by the time we received the money, it was 4 years later, and everything was double the price at least. So that was a huge undertake. Then the fit out, because the building was ready, but then Simon had left part of the building for us to do the fit out. And so it was supposed to take 3 months, and it took 9 months. And then, like I said, I don't know if you heard when I said that our chef that we had hired a couple months before, he went through a terrible divorce as well as a PTSD. He had to step down a week before we opened. And that was a full-time chef. So thank goodness I had done a plant-based chef course, because then I could start writing, but it was really hard. I had a 1-year-old at the time, and we don't have family here. But one thing that I learned, and thank you, that was a great question. God, if you're willing and you step in faith, God will always give you a way out. Sometimes, for some reason, and I think I know the reason, he waits for the very last second, either before you break or before something breaks, but he will step in. My experience and my husband's experience is that God will always provide. He's never let us down, not one day. We've had so many stories of how he showed up. And like, for example, Gabby, this lady, she was our rescuer. She was babysitting for us when we needed, and even up to this day, sometimes some things happen. I've got Diana 5 weeks in Brazil for her holiday that she had not taken for years. She went there, and now if something happens at Food Farmacy with one of our 3 that are scheduled there, I don't know, could be like they got a diary or something, then I have to run in there, because that's what we do. So we need to be ready to prioritize and live or die for that ministry. And God will give you what you need, but you need to be ready for the roller coaster, because it's definitely not everyday blue sky. Yes.
Thank you.
Good question.
I've got a little story that Camila told me about the coffee. A lady came in. She says, I've been trying to cut back on my coffee. She says, I have the coffee you give me in the morning, and I have 1 in the afternoon, so I've cut down to 2 cups of coffee. And that's when Camila said, well, and actually, you've cut down to 1, because ours is decaf, and that was the first time the lady knew about it.
She's actually still, she works at a chiropractor practice nearby, like 5 minutes away in Warners Bay. She goes there at least 2 times a week. And she would always have her meal and then a coffee. And she says, I have mine in the morning and then here. And she says that, I'm trying to cut down. And when I told her that it was, she couldn't believe it. So for those that are, would be a coffee drinks, I challenge you to go there and check out the coffee, because there is life after decaf.
I have a very discerning coffee loving person closely related to me, who it's the first time this person said I've tasted decaf and couldn't tell the difference. She said, always, otherwise I have. And part of it is because you guys not only have a great coffee machine, the top line, but the coffee beans are also top of the line as well.
So I just wanted to say, what is the principle, right? When we said, I actually was not going to offer decaf because I don't like the fake stuff, or I don't like the pretending things or the replaced things. And I wanted it to be everything pure. So I actually researched. And with the coffee thing, I talked to the consultants, like people that have been in the coffee industry, like gurus for like 10 years that know everything about coffee. And they said to me, number 1, coffee is Colombian, like the best quality. And he told me the machine and everything. I learned every single process because I want to understand how can we recreate the experience, the taste, the flavor, everything. And anyhow, it was everything like, and we get organic beans, Colombian beans, and they're freshly, everything like the freshly roasted, so it impacts the taste. But why I'm mentioning this to you? Because you really need to do something that your heart is, so you do the best you can. You need to be the best. Because if you're a so-so, then, no matter what you do, you're not going to be attracting people. So we know that we're not perfect. We have a long learning curve still, and we learn every day. But it is just putting your passion to it in every day, and that will speak lots. People will recognize that. And then they will, if you believe it, that it's possible, then they will believe it.
Glenn, this is the last question, if that's all right with people.
So, Camila, when will you and Joseph have enough people trained up so you can go to Saudi Arabia?
Thank you for asking. Well, I guess my answer is not going to be connected because we don't know. If God wants us to go Saudi Arabia, we certainly will go. Like we have decided a few years back that we were going to go wherever God sends us. We have a couple that, but first of all, the team at Food Farmacy now, they operate without us. So, for example, this week, I have not been there nearly but it's been a while. Like I was in Tasmania last week, so it's been operating without us. It is still a little bit fragile when it comes to the church plant because our team is so small. So if we're not there, and then the other family is not there, and then we don't have the core team because it's only 3 families that are leaders. Anyway, so that's... But we have been bringing, so there's a couple. So there's this lady, she's a chef. She volunteered at Manna Haven, and she went to study business in London. Her name is Patty. And we are applying, we're just waiting for their visa, her and her husband. So her husband is an engineer and also a passion for farming. So they are both coming. And our goal, they're very much similar to Joseph and I in terms of how we came here. We're young, before kids, just freshly married and, really passionate about mission. Our goal is to train them so that they can take over the leadership. Because the team is there right now to function, and we are raising the leaders. So we're investing on the leaders. I am passionate to say that even on the health director role, I have been, coaching people. I've always had 3 people in my mind that I would try to invest some time and invite them for trainings. And, so it is in my mind that this needs to be passed. I actually envision that in the next term, I already want some other leaders to be on.
Yes, Camila, you're a long way from home. What brought you to Australia?
Okay, that's a really long story, but it's basically my husband and I, we had a passion for mission. We just decided that we were going to leave our jobs and become missionaries. We were both working in finance. So my husband was investment banking at Credit Suisse, and then I was working at Goldman Sachs, also an investment banking. I was in the securities business. And so we just decided that we've, in our minds, had sort of reached a little bit of a mountain that people were wanting to go, and we just thought there's not that much here. So we were asking God what was there, and we were being inspired to just share. We always say this, that we wanted to invest in what matters and invest on assets that could be potentially eternal value, which are people. So then we decided to become missionaries. We actually thought at first that we were going to somewhere in Africa or Iraq. At the time, there was a lot of things happening in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we thought, let's just go there. But for some reason, God sent us right here to Australia. And people always laugh at me when I say that I'm a missionary in Australia. And but that's exactly where God sent us.
Right. Thank you. There's a great book called The Second Mountain. That sounds like a classic example of a second mountain. Thank you.
If you hear their stories sometime, the willingness to be where God leads is huge. And it's taken a lot of sacrifice. You saw hints of that through her story. But we need to replicate, and having her and Joseph, Camila, you and Joseph, training and investing in others is the part of it that really excites me about this. So thank you again. Let's give Camila a hand, shall we?
I just wanted to say one thing. A lot of times people hear us saying, how do you do it? You have to identify your strengths and you work with your strengths. Don't try to compare yourself with others. And identify your strengths and ask God to lead you, and He will do it. And just be willing, and He will lead you.
Thank you very much, Camila. We have scheduled now a panel discussion that will go through to our final words. And so while Arika is setting that up, and if I could ask the panel to come up and take a seat, if you'd like to grab a drink and come back to the table, that means we can finish close to 4 o'clock to be able to get you all out of here. So yes, I need those people who are going to be on the panel up here, and we need the microphones. Yes, here we go. Glenn, Maddie, Shay, Camila, Jessica, myself. Jessica, Camila, Shay, Maddie, Glenn. Yeah, that should be it. So, do you want to thank people before I thank people? Sorry. It's kind of a larger panel, so we do hope they will give short, succinct answers. We promise to finish just before 4 so we can wrap up by 4. Let me introduce the panel to you. If you don't know, Maddie was the person who spearheaded last night with Marianne. The study you did with the questions that have, I believe, going to have a real influence into our future direction as a church. Next to her is Shaylee. Now, Shaylee was one of the participants in those questions, and Shay also works for Maddie, and Shay also works for me. So, okay, she didn't have a choice, not really. No. Next to her, Shaylee is also somebody who has quite strong relationships with, because of growing up in an Adventist school that had a lot of Muslim people there. Shaylee has very good connections and relationships in the Muslim community, was actually chief bridesmaid at a Muslim wedding in the last couple of months. Next to her is Jessica Kraus, who also, no, she doesn't work for me.
He works for me.
So Jessica is my daughter. And I wanted her here because she's one of, which we found out, 3 people on this panel who grew up in church plants. And so I wanted to ask questions what that looked like. And Camila, because of her practical experience, but the challenge a lot of centres of influence have is having healthy church plants grow out of centres of influence. So not only does she have a very successful centre of influence that is still growing and developing, but the church planting aspect of it is pretty unique within the church here in Australia. And Pastor Glenn Townend, I'm not sure why he's here, but...
And I don't have a mic.
Which was intentional. But Pastor Glenn can do 2 perspectives that I'd like to hear from. A, he is a generational church planter, so he grew up in the church plant, and his kids grew up in the church plant. So I wanted to hear that perspective, but also, as an administrator, some of the challenges that have been mentioned here, I'd like him to address. So, go real quick. Maddie, can I ask you first, when it comes to what you presented last night and going through this whole process, what's probably the biggest learning or the biggest challenge that has come out of what you've discovered?
I think the subject of relevance, I think, has probably been the biggest one for me. And I was chatting with Mark over lunch about this as well. We are with a lot of the things that we've discussed this weekend. It fits really nicely when you look at the cycle of evangelism. It fits really nicely towards the beginning part of the cycle. But as you begin to engage, people have questions which relate to their life today. And we have a beautiful framework to start off with within the Adventist Church. But there are questions which, let's take a look at, we were chatting about climate change earlier. It feels like the questions that culture is asking today, there is need for us to be able to apply the gospel to those questions in a deeper way, a more significant way. For me personally, I believe that there is a really strong theology of climate change and of a relationship with the earth, and we can find that all through the Bible. So it's a matter of developing that gospel fluency. So that was the biggest thing that really hit home for me.
Maybe we need a department of creation care throughout our church.
It's called stewardship.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing in the Pacific, we have Adventist scientists and Adventist young people who are some of the most proactive people in climate change in their countries, which we don't hear about. But I'm telling you, you've heard about it now. So we do know how to be relevant and adaptable in the Pacific, probably better than here. It's all about, we've got a message, we've just got to market it in a way that's relevant. And I think we can do it. That's your job, Maddie. Help us.
Well, from my position, I see, and this is probably, I'm talking to the people in the room that are our lecturers and teachers and our theologians, when we're developing some of those deeper concepts, particularly, we've got questions around how do we engage with the LGBT community, how do we, and so, what is our theology on personhood? What does that mean? All those, that depth and that nuance, I think there is more work to be done in that space to really be able to give our young people some real foundation to stand on. Okay, how does the gospel speak into all these issues that culture is struggling with right now? Diversity and racism and all this stuff. They're not new, but I think we can do more work around that and really.
Because these are the questions society is asking.
Yes. Yeah.
And our voice in many of these areas seems to be pretty silent. Yeah, thanks for that.
And I would say, if we do have voice and we're not doing anything about it, shut up. We've got to do something about it and then have a voice.
Yeah, so where I see that, sort of, I see that as the next challenge. You know, we can create safe communities and we can really engage with people, and we've got a good platform to do it off, but we need to continue through with that to the latter stages of the discipleship journey and really provide some depth and some answers. And, you know, and I feel like it's difficult because from the point of view that we hold a faith that we believe in the imminence of Jesus' coming, and we think, putting all that effort into, I guess, being relevant to today's generation, but the issue is that our kids are asking the questions right now. They need answers now. And yeah, we need to do a better job at speaking into each of those spaces.
Yeah, and I think that's a topic that at the church administrations is taking that forward pretty seriously. So it'll be interesting to see the next little while watch that space. Can I ask those people, start with you, Jessica, on those who are raised in church plants, how has that impacted you when you go into more established churches?
I use the phrase that it ruined me, which isn't a negative thing, but I was at a church plant for the first 18 years of my life, and so that was normal for me. And so it was normal for me to have a church where I knew I could bring my non-Christian, post-Christian friends to, and they'd know what was going on. The topics that were discussed, even if they were deep theological concepts, they were discussed in a way that was easy to understand. And then I'd come back, I guess, to a more established church, and I'd go, why are we saying Happy Sabbath again? Where is this insular language coming from? How come we're discussing these issues in a way that's so complex that me as a however many generation Adventist can't understand them? So it's ruined me, but it's also been a real blessing because I've seen what the church can be, and I've seen, I think, the way that the church has such potential to make such a huge impact, and I think one of the key ways it's going to be is through church plants. Yeah.
My daughter says Happy Sabbath because the house is full of people and she gets ice cream.
Dairy free, of course.
Sometimes.
Between the ages of 10 and 15, I grew up in Papua New Guinea. When I first went to the place we lived, there was one Adventist church. In those 5 years, when we left, there were 5. And I was involved in that whole process as a kid. And that taught me that the gospel can multiply. And I have believed that, and I live that, I preach, I teach it all the time. Came back to Australia, my dad started 2 churches in the Tweed Valley. That's where I first learnt to preach. Some interesting stories there. My kids, I've attempted 3, and as I told you, 1 is going reasonably well. 1 completely failed, and another one's a little different. 2 of them now are planting churches. So it's kind of a generational thing in our family, and that's a God-given gift and experience. And whatever God gives you, use it, make it for him and his mission.
I also think it's one of the safest places to raise kids is in a church plant, because there they see society, but they do it in a context where you are and you can be talking to them about it. So they see the alcoholic that comes along and they get to talk about it with their family and their church. They're not just shielded from it and then go to university and find, oh, these people that the church says were bad are actually really nice. You know, they actually experience that whole journey, and I think it helps protect, help them grow up in a healthy way. Maddie, did you grow up in a church plant?
Yeah, so for a few years in my late teens, which was good, got a lot of opportunities, but also learnt a lot of lessons of how not to do it.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Shay, could you talk about what do you think the next generation churches could look like? And, even in the context of your friends that you have to this day in the Muslim community.
Sure. Another project that Maddie is working on is about, we are working on, is, did you call it the Alpha Church?
Yeah, trying to understand trying to dream about what would a church look like for the Alpha generation, for the next generation, in terms of the physical structure and the physical buildings, physical space.
Yeah, and I have a really deep passion for working with teenagers, so that project is quite relevant in thinking about what is this next generation coming up under us going to want out of their church. What topics do we include? What does it look like? What makes them feel comfortable? And part of that, in the report that we looked at, I reflected that a church that is not, especially for people who are outside of our religion, that is not so different from the outside world. So they're not walking completely into a space that's out of their comfort zone, but there is still I can't say that word.
Familiarity?
Yes, that one.
We're just here to help our assistants grow and develop.
Within the context that they're walking into, so they don't have to leave everything behind that they're used to, and whether that's the church building itself, whether that's the people that they're interacting with, that they can see something from their own lives reflected in the church building that they're walking into, I think is really important. With talking about like the friends that I have, I can't say I've ever really thought about the fact that I have multi-racial and multi-denominational, is that the word?
Religious,
friends, or family as well. But I do think that is a blessing and a social context that God has placed me in, just to grow my perception of the world and broaden my view. If anything, I can't say I go into any of those relationships thinking I'm ever going to convert them or baptize them. That's not my aim. My end goal is just to live life with them and learn from each other, and along the way, if they see a glimpse of Jesus in what I do or in somebody who's connected to me does, then that's great, and if they don't, then it's still been worthwhile, because I'm just there to be their friend or to be part of their family. I had a conversation with my uncle last night, and he's Hindu, and he reflected that he had a bad experience with our church 20 years ago, and he can remember that experience to the dot, because when he was marrying my auntie, they wouldn't marry him in an Adventist church because he was Hindu and she was Adventist, and that wasn't seen as right. And that's something that turns people away from what we do, and how do we correct our thinking in structural context like that as well. I just think there are things that we do that turn people away that aren't as important as maybe we think that they are.
Have you had any of those friends who have different, and it's more than denominations, it's actually different religions, join you in the work you're doing with teens?
Yeah, I have. So my best friend whose wedding I was at, she comes and helps me. She's very good with food. So she's Egyptian, and her mum have a catering company, and she'll come in and she'll help us do setup. She's also really good with starting her own businesses and does design and stuff like that. So her and her cousins will come in and help, and these are people I see. Every Wednesday night we go and do something, and their family is my family type of thing, and it's a blessing to be able to be part of a whole different community, because
like her mum, I'm like an extra daughter, like in their household. And so whenever I have an event on and I need volunteers, because they're my friend, it's like, hey, can you come and, I know you have this skill, can you come and help me set this up? So they're aware of what I do. They follow my Imagine Teen page and like all our posts and all of that. So yeah.
Can I jump in here? When I asked Shay if she would speak on this panel, she basically said, I have nothing to say. And so, notice I had to push her a little bit. But think about that. The relationships she has built in these communities where they see her as part of their family. Isn't that what we want with all of our people? And it's not just with other religions, it's throughout the community. So hats off to you, Shay. And
Wayne, can I give you an example too? Because I think what Maddie and what Shane is saying is very relevant. So just for you to have like an idea of what this kind of church looks like, right? So at Food Farmacy right now, because we're a small church, I'm not going to give too many details because I don't want like expose people. But we've got one young person, like a teenager, who's asked us that she wants to be called another name, like a boy's name. And some of us never met her as a girl, met her now as a boy. And there's another one who is a teenager as well that is identified herself as a she and a they. So why I'm bringing this up is because if you're going to be immersed in the community, you're going to get your hands dirty. And that means Jesus had to step from his beautiful palace, wherever that is, and to come and get dirty in this earth because of you. So how much are you willing to step out of what you think it is the ideal to actually... You're only able to do that if Jesus helps you, because we are so set on our own like bubble or what we think it is real, right? But it's easy to also to get and lose the values and the principles. So we don't want to lose that. That is identity. You want to keep that. But when you love people, and that's what I think you've experienced, when you love them, you can still keep your principles and your value, because they are going to feel like you see them as they are, and you're not judging them, you're not telling them what to do. You're just living with them, living life with them. And so, look, it's challenging to me as a 41, nearly 42 years old, to come into this new world now where everything is very... things change. One day you're talking to them, they're a girl. The other day they ask you to call a boy. And the question is how so like our kids are immersed into this reality, but what I can see is that they're building relationships with these people. So when they look at them, they don't look as a they, as a she, as a he, or like judging. They love them because they're friends. And so it is a fine line, but I think we need to trust that if Jesus was concerned about getting dirty with sin, he would have never came. But he took that risk, and he trusted that God was going to get his back. And I think that's the framework that we need to... It's not easy. So I just wanted to mention that, because what you're saying in reality, when you go to the reality, you're not going to have a little notebook telling you what to do. And it's going to be challenging.
Anyone else want to speak to that? Shay?
Yeah, just had some more thoughts while you were speaking. Wasn't expecting any more. But just with that, with these friend groups that I have, it gets to a point where they want to plan something during Sabbath hours, and because we've been friends for 7 years, they're like, oh no, wait, that's your Sabbath, like, don't worry about it. To the point where, like, my best friend who got married is explaining to her husband what Sabbath is. I'm not explaining it, she's explaining it, because she understands what I believe, because we've been able to dialogue over the years, and we only did that in the last 2 or 3 years. It took a while to come to a point where we discussed our religions and realized that there is quite a lot of similarity between Islam and Christianity, and that opened a door to more conversations, and which is really interesting as well. But just before I pass it back to you, I got baptized in 2019, and a friend I went to uni with, I went to Western Sydney, and he's the only friend I made during my time at Western Sydney, because it's not like Avondale, you're not on a campus, you barely interact with the same people with all your multiple classes. We only met in the last 6 months of my degree, and we were doing placements together, and he's Buddhist, comes from a family of Buddhists, and I always say, because I've never used that degree in health science, if he's the only reason I went to that uni, I'm okay with it, because we became friends and he came to my baptism and we have conversation all the time, and he's the loveliest person I have ever met, like just hands down one of the best people, and he'll have conversations with me, and I've been able to give him resources like if you can eat, you can make disciples and things like that, because he's just open to learning about everything. So if you can have conversations with people and be friends with them and invite them to discuss things, then I think you go into the community thinking I'm going to make a friendship, not I'm going to bring you into my church or bring you into baptism or anything like that.
Jessica, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but your experience through university, I know you came to Avondale and made friends that you're going to have the rest of your life. And then going to Newcastle University and making friends that you'll have for the rest of your life. How has it been challenging experiencing the Christian world and social media, Facebook, stuff like that, and trying to share Christianity with your friends who kind of look at that stuff and go, is that what you're like? You guys are weird. And then I've heard them say, Jessica, you're the closest thing to Jesus. You finished the question.
I'm an empath, so if he cries, I'll cry too.
You're the closest thing to Jesus I've seen. How has that impacted your life? Avondale, amazing friends you've made. Then seeing at university, and then seeing the impact Christians have had on your secular atheist friends.
I think it's kind of a two-part question. I think I was very blessed coming to Avondale. As Dad said, I made lifelong friends. But then I get the impression sometimes that as Adventists, we're a little bit scared of secular universities. Like we talk about sending our young people to universities, and it's almost like we're sending them to the depths of something. But some of the best people that I have met were at my secular university, and some of them, when I interacted with them, I was the first Christian they'd ever interacted with. So it wasn't a matter of like, oh, let's talk about the denominations. It was literally like, so who's Jesus? I don't know who that is. So it was such a cool opportunity as part of that. And then I think a difficulty that I have had with social media is that I have friends who are Adventist and I have friends who are very much not. And seeing sometimes posts either that I've been tagged in or that have been posted around that some of my friends have had to witness or have had to interact with, it's really been difficult for me because I've been very fortunate to have experienced Jesus and the love and acceptance that Jesus provides. And then I sometimes see posts by Christians that lack the nuance that I think this society demands. And I think for me, it's been difficult, but it's also been a real blessing to be able to walk in that space and I guess be that buffer in between my friends who are seeing these posts and asking questions about it and going, well, is it this black and white? Why do we have to talk about it in these black and white terms, and being able to dialogue with them? But yeah, it's been a challenge. I think genuinely speaking, we need to be careful as Christians what we post, because we have Christian friends, but our non-Christian friends see it too. I always, when I see posts that are just Bible verses and have no context, have no explanation. And I look at the Bible and I see the key people that Jesus quoted just scripture to, and the most famous one was the devil. And that was really one of the only times he did it without any context. And so I think we need to be really careful in how we post. Sorry, that's my little rant for the day. But, yeah.
Thank you. Camila, I'm interested in the fact that you've got a centre of influence that's transitioning to a church plant, which is what we always want to see. Do you have a couple of key points that you think are very important for anyone considering to do that?
Yeah, well, first of all, is that we don't know what we're doing. I think when it comes to building churches or gaining souls, who are we, right? We don't know what we're doing. God is the one who knows. I want to bridge a little bit on what you just shared, just because I think it's so important. Look, like I said, I'm not a young person, probably a little bit on the older side, but I've also experienced similar things where I felt like I had to be sometimes even taking a stand that it was stronger stand than what I intended, because I was literally facing times that I was almost battling with my Christian friends on social media, because I needed to take a stand that showed the other side of being an Adventist. And because if my contacts of because we have communities on Facebook that are to support, to help our people that are coming on a journey with us, right? And my contacts were asking me, like, hey, where, I thought the Adventists stand for this, but now it's like I see this because it's around my community. And I had to take stronger stand where I experienced sometimes my own friends, my Christian friends or my Adventist friends coming at me angry because I'm taking that stand, but they don't understand. And then I had to kind of say, look, the reason why I'm having this voice, it's not for you, it's for the others. And people just get very defensive. So I hear you, and I think that's really something that the fluency that Maddie has talked about, especially for us leaders, it needs to be as to transition from a center of influence to a church plant. You need to master that fluency. You need to be able to quickly, because this is what I learned. Sometimes, it's taking 3 years, 4 years, and with what I had at the time, that's as good as I could do. But as we grow and we become more fluent in this, then we're able to convert these things quicker, just because now you've mastering and you're not longer hesitant or insecure about having a spiritual conversation with people. Joseph and I like to use the 4 quadrants of having conversations. And now we usually have a conversation with the person on our center of influence for the first time. And we try as much as possible to let them to share something that is meaningful to them about their families or something. So you go like a little bit deeper. And usually the second or third time, they will bring up something spiritually. So it's so interesting that you don't need to bring it up. If you hear them, if you listen and you share from your personal experience, they will ask questions. But when they ask questions, you need to be fluent on that subject, and they will ask the hard questions. And like, for example, that I said, about what we think, how would Jesus see this gender thing and that is going on? If you're not able to answer that in a loving way, in a biblical way, in a solid way, you cannot be afraid of this is what I think. Because even if they don't agree with you, they need to see that you are authentic, you are genuine. If they see that you're not sure, or if you're just being kind of memorized and you're saying something, then you're not passing, and the worst thing is that on these situations, you're just going to feel like you're failing yourself. And I think the sentiment of failure, it's something that it's been present with me all the time. Like, I always feel like I'm not doing good enough. But I also am reminded every time that it's, this is something that I tell myself, like it's my self-talk, Camila, even if you're failing, this is not your business. It's God's business. And if He wants you to quit, He'll let you know. But if He doesn't, then continue doing your best. And those questions that you said, what do you do? I tell myself almost on a daily basis, this is not your business, it's God's business. When things go really bad, I think, okay, God, this is my prayer. I'm being honest. You fix it. These are your people. You created them. Then you fix it, because I don't know what to do.
Thank you. Craig, are you able to put my last slide up? I want to transition, and it's what Camila was talking about in the conversations that Maddie and Mary Ellen made. One of the big things that came up was the issue of listening. And I asked Shay just to put together a few illustrations that we use, and I think I personally have used every one of these. I have seen people accept Jesus Christ using the bridge illustration. Jessica was taught this at about the age of 5, and she, at her school, did the bridge illustration on the board for all the pagan Adventist friends that were in the Adventist school. Okay? So I'm not, I have used these, and in a way they've been effective. But I want you to notice something about every one of these. None of them have the idea of listening before the presentation. None of them talk about, okay, after you're converted, how are you to live? You've crossed the bridge, you're there. You've passed from death to life, which is true. But how are you now supposed to live as a lifelong disciple? So I want the panel to just talk for a few moments about this hugely important issue that I don't think we're good at, of listening. Camila talked about we have these questions, which basically are us learning how to listen. Maddie, was this something that you really hit in
massive.
this?
Yeah, and coming from a business background, everything starts with listening. It's a universal principle if you want to connect, if you want to engage. And, I think one of the reasons it's more important now than it was, let's say, 50, 80 years ago, is back then, Christianity being dominant, you were swimming in it, right? So it was part of who you are. We're now getting to the point where some of these things that we've discussed today, and even looking at the values that you put up in terms of food pharmacy values around, sustainability, around plant-based, around that kind of thing. For the first time, we're in a position where secular culture is or perceives itself in a position of moral high ground in relationship to Christianity, in relationship to the church. And with issues like this, and you see this discussed online, where you'll have, let's say, within the plant-based or the vegan discussions online, where you'll have Christians jump in and essentially say things along the lines of, animal slaughter and things like that are fine because essentially it's, it's okay because it was in the Bible and we're allowed to do it. And, for the massive majority of people that are essentially in the secular context taking the view that, look, this is inhumane and we need to stop doing it, they look upon that as going, how can Christians? And I think it says to what you were saying before, Camila, that we then need to have a stronger voice, right? We need to have a more clear voice in a calm way, because we don't want that. Yeah, it is so much more important now. The listening we have to do has to be at a level where we understand the feelings and the sensibilities and how the culture has turned.
Einstein famously apparently once said, if he was given a problem, as in share your faith, we'd say, he said he would work on the question. If he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes on the question and 5 minutes on the solution. Think about that when we're sharing the gospel. How much percentage of time are we willing to listen and actually hear the question and actually understand the issues before we provide an answer? Is it 55 minutes to 5 minutes? This is something that has personally challenged me hugely. Anyone else like to comment on this?
Just wanted to say something that we had one of the most popular series that we had on our church plant, which is like this the bridging thing. It was this series that we provided, so people come to our health programs and we can sometimes say, oh, we're going to have this program that it was actually not a spiritual program. It was sort of a spiritual program, but we said it's called My Story. And so everyone that is, so let's say we have a first day, and a little introduction, and let's say we have 10 people, we're going to say, okay, for the next 10 weeks, each person is going to share their story. So we give them a platform of 40 minutes for them to share their story. And then we say, okay, and there are rules, like criteria. Nobody's allowed to judge, nobody's allowed to question. You can affirm the person or don't say anything, right? And then let them, everybody shares. And we did that. And it was one of the most beautiful things we've ever done, because by listening, and the amazing thing is that at the end of every story, they would themselves somehow connect their story with God. And it would just come so beautifully, and we never said anything, and it was just really beautiful. And I think that when everyone's got a story, and God is present in every story. Sometimes you have to give them a place and a space for them to hear their own story so they can see God in it.
I think it's brilliant. Very good. Okay, I'm going to ask Glenn to finish off on a different topic, but do you want to speak to this, did you?
Yeah. All right, I'm going to just do a little test. If everybody can just stand up, because you've been sitting for a long time, and sitting's the new smoking, and we don't want that. So you've got an alternative. You've been working with some people for a little while, and you can start sharing the Bible with them. The two alternatives are you will share the gospel, or you will share about the characteristics and the identity of Babylon in Revelation. Okay, sit down if you're going to share the gospel first.
Depends how you're talking about Babylon, my friend. I'm here for Babylon.
You're here for Babylon, and so am I. The bottom line is, if you've been listening, the answer may be different. And we presume a Christian worldview, and that the gospel will impact. If you're actually talking to a Muslim, they are more interested in corrupt Christianity, which is all about Babylon and its identity. It's whether you've been listening to the cues of the worldview as what you present first. And we have got over nearly a million Muslims in this country. Do you know that at different times in Sydney, well, let me go further. Muslims in the Quran are looking for pure Christianity, the people of the book. There are imams in Sydney and in Saudi Arabia who believe that the Seventh-day Adventists are the people of the book. Because we expose Babylon, and although not perfect ourselves, try to uphold the principles that they live by. Now, not many people know that, and I am trusting you with that information, because the General Conference a few years back have had significant dialogue with leading Muslims in Australia over this. And as a church, we've had to be really sensitive to their needs and our needs of identity. Do you get it? And do you know that there are, well, just recently, you tell the story. about Muslims being baptised? Because you told me, but I have heard it since from someone else.
Which story?
The one about the whole lot of Muslims being baptised in a Muslim country.
Oh, yeah. And we're talking thousands here and have moved into house churches. And some of these houses are Muslim-owned people, own the houses, but want the Adventists to have a house church there. Can I also say, that's the Muslim story, and it's huge, preaching Babylon. May I suggest that many of our secular post-Christians are interested in Babylon because they're also interested in the corruption of society and the corruption of the church. So Babylon is actually something that resonates, if explained correctly and in the language that they understand, that is very relevant to post-Christian people. In Melbourne, there was a Seventh Adventist church that these Muslim people went to because their Muslim place had been closed down because of lack of car parking. And the council wouldn't allow them to do any more. They actually went to the Adventist church and said, "Can we use your facility?" And the Adventist church met and said, "What?" The Adventist church said yes. And so the Muslims started meeting there, and the Muslims were talking, and they said, "What are you trying to do to this place?" "Oh, we're raising money." "What for?" "Oh, we're going to have carpet." "What's the carpet?" "Oh, that's that type of carpet," and everything like that. And well, the Adventists turned up next week, and the place was carpeted. And an Adventist was in a taxi, and he's driving in the taxi, and the taxi driver says, "Who are you?" "Tada, I'm a Seventh Adventist, I go to this church." "Oh, well, I can't charge you because you're the ones who are looking after our brothers and sisters." So speaking the language, showing some love, that church got a painted church and carpet out of their Muslim brothers and sisters. Okay. Can I bring this time together? I'd like Glenn just to speak to you as theology students and partners looking into the future for work within the denomination. This is the man who is the president of our division. If anyone knows our structure and the challenges that you will face going into the future and working within our system, and we are both, well, all of us here have committed ourselves as part of this church. What would your advice be for those who feel that maybe they're a little bit frustrated, Glenn, about what they might face going out into the field in churches and in conferences, etc.?
Don't lose your holy discontent.
That's good.
I still have it. I had it before I came to Avondale. I had it at Avondale. I've had it in every aspect of my ministry.
And at every stage you've done something about it.
I have tried. That's true. And I'm still discontent. We as a church are not as we could be or in the blessings, the full blessing of Jesus Christ. And it takes a whole lot of others who see that what we have and what we have is just amazing, but how we go about it, the biggest joys will be working with people. The biggest frustrations will be working with people. And hey, we're all people, so we've got to learn to get on and listen to each other and learn. And the community of faith is an incredible fellowship. And if we listen and if we love and we keep strong to our principles and beliefs that I've heard here, God can do some amazing things. And so there's some basics that I would say you hang on to and believe them as the principles that you will live by. And I think you might have just heard what they are for me. I still want to see a whole lot of change. And that's about, having a vision for what God can do and will do in his church. And it will be a loving, multiplying, disciple-making movement which will connect with every community in the South Pacific and around the world. And we will be sending missionaries not only to Saudi Arabia, but all over the place.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Glenn. Okay, I'd like to thank the panel very much for doing this. I think he wants to send some people to Saudi Arabia. We need them here first, Pastor Glenn. Can I just, an observation, you're moving into the future. It's always good to know there's people like Pastor Glenn in the roles that they're in. Right? You've heard his heart, and every one of these symposiums that we have run here with Avondale, Pastor Glenn has been a part of. He's a busy man. We send out, are you free on these dates? And we work things around because of that. But his commitment to this, what we're doing here, and to you, is at that level. And I want to thank my colleagues, Nick Cross, he's on the ministry strategy team with me. His wife, Andrea, she works with Geraldine as well. You've got Dr. Gilbert Kanji, who's taking on this new role, is part of this. Maddie and Shay, I want to thank them. The team that puts this together, if you look at your program, it says sponsors. It's actually not right. It's actually the team that's put this together. Our 2 union representatives apologise for not being able to be here, but in planning this, our unions, the seminary, Avondale University, are so much invested in what we're doing here. And the South Pacific Division has been glad to be able to sponsor this. So I want to thank them all. I want to publicly thank being able to work with, what's your name? Erika and Hensley, the 3 of us, and with Shay, have been steering this, and then the whole seminary under Wendy. We really love that partnership that we've developed. And I'll get Erika to come forward in a moment, but if I could ask Shay and anybody who wants to help to hand out those books. We want to hand 2 resources to you. One is called the Church Planters, sorry? Oh, sorry about that. Get it on the way out. I think that was the casual thing they said. So there's two books. There's The Church Planter's Journey, which I think is probably one of the best on church planting, a whole process of planting churches. It's our gift to you. And Planting the Future is written by an Adventist on planting churches for the future. You're welcome to that as well. I think The Church Planter's Journey is actually one of your textbooks, but now you actually get it in your sweaty little hands for that. So, Erika, I'd invite you to come forward, and final thanks and prayer. And again, thank you so much for being part of this. We want to expand this out to involve other students from Avondale, and so we're going to start doing more advertising so other students, not just those in these classes, have to attend, and eventually we want it to be a lot more out there with all our conferences. Eventually we want to be running this at Fulton as well, and then also PAU. We've had requests to be able to run these symposiums in those for their cultural context as well.
The airlines have learned for a long time that the way to cover the world is to work in alliances. So we have Star Alliance, the One World, Sky Team. I think that's what we've been trying to do, to recognize that different entities of the church and specialists can work together. And the symposium provides that space and forum for us to work together as a church. Wayne has thanked those special people that work behind the scenes for a long time. In fact, we have started already to think semester 1 in terms of our next symposium. But I want to recognize and thank our special speakers for this round of the symposium. Starting last evening, of course, with Pastor Townend, our division president. And then we had Maddie and Mary Allen, who's not here with us. Then this morning we had a great start with Mark, our colleague from the seminary, and Hensley. Then, of course, back to Wayne before we had lunch. Grateful for the partnership with TD, with Anthony Smith. That was challenging. And we're looking forward. I think part of the conversation, Wayne, is that sometime after you consulted with the leadership of the division, we may see him or some of them from their part of the world visiting us, and maybe some here going across as well. Then, of course, Camila. I was saying to Camila, recognizing that the North New South Wales Conference pastors and their spouses are meeting in Stewart's Point this weekend. And so their family had to split. So Joseph can be up the north and she can be here because we wanted her presentation to be part of this. We're very grateful. And then, of course, the members of our panel. I think I have covered all of our presenters for this weekend. So to those of you who are viewing this program online and those of us who are on our campus, we just want to say thank you to you. Could we put our hands together for our presenters, our guests, and our participants in our panel? Now, there are some other people that do the heavy lifting in terms of making sure that technology and other resources are under control and make sure that they will serve the purpose of this weekend. And so we've had the service of Craig from the university last evening and today. Thank you, Craig, for your partnership, not only in terms of management of our equipment, but also making sure that we have the streaming taking place for the benefit of our students. Going back, thank you, Shay, for our booklet. That booklet is not only available to us here, but to our online participants. It's an interactive tool. Hopefully, they are also using at the same time. So again, to you, I think we can have a symposium, but with our people, it's not a symposium. Thank you so much. We will communicate with you as soon as we confirm Glenn's schedule for the first semester so that he can be here with us at the same time. I think it would be appropriate, Glenn, if you can pray as we finish, as our leader for this part of the world field. And again, thank you from the seminary and university for the support that we get from the South Pacific Division. So let's stand. And again, after our prayer on your way out, Shay and maybe Jessica or one other person will assist with that little gift for you. Thank you, Glenn.
Our great eternal God who is our Father, you've been here, you're with us, you live inside us through your Spirit. And Holy Spirit, thank you for guiding us, giving us insight, and challenge us to live like Jesus, because he, as our Saviour, is also our Lord. And great insights, you'll put it all together. And may we just keep committing ourselves to you, allowing you to do what you want to do within us. And we pray it for your glory, and we see a multiplying disciple-making movement until you come. Thanks, Jesus. Amen.